Welcome also on behalf of my end, and thank you, EVP, for joining us. You caught the last of the presentation of the report. You've obviously been briefed. Can I ask you just for your reflections? A lot of good news, but also a lot of key recommendations. What are your takeaways from it?
Yeah, I think it was very, of course, interesting to hear the outcomes because, of course, it's very much, I think, confirms already what our own estimation is also about the situation where we are. So we have many strengths, but also there's clear parts where we are facing big gaps and we are lagging behind. And of course, I think that we have to really build our strategy for our strengths. And of course, we are in good situation because we have very good basis anyway for the innovations and for the competitiveness. And I'm very confident also that we have everything what is needed to be competitive also in this area. But of course, it means that we have to act now with the speed and with scale also. And we have scale if we are able also to harness, of course, the full potential of our single market.
And if we go into the recommendations, one of them was more simplification, less regulatory burden. That is what this Commission has done. You have had the digital omnibus. What more is more needed, and what more do you want to do on that front?
Yeah, when this Commission started, one of the first documents, or in fact it was the first important decision from our side, it was really adopting our competitiveness compass. And there are especially three very important sectors where we are working now, and they are very much connected also to our technological competitiveness. One is, of course, to really remove barriers from our single market, because we still have too many obstacles between the member states. We are too fragmented, and of course this EU Inc. was mentioned here, part of our 28 regime. It's also the way how we want to really also overcome the obstacles what we have between the member states to really make it possible for the company to operate cross-border under one company law. So it's very important. But then overall also the simplification efforts in all the sectors to make sure that we can cut regulatory burden and bureaucracy, and also look that our rules are up to date. We have rules which are encouraging innovations and investments, and we don't have very complicated overlapping rules like it's often the case now. So this is the work we are now doing with the simplification in all the sectors. And then third part, what was very important, it was very much underlined here. In the end, it's really the capital markets and need for capital markets, because we have massively capital in the European Union, but we are not really able to attract that capital to investments in European Union. So, for example, our households, they have more than 10 trillion euros in the bank accounts, in the savings accounts. And our households and citizens, they are not so willing to invest. And also pension funds were mentioned here. And our savings and investment union initiative, of course, is very crucial for our technological competitiveness. But in the same time, I want to underline also the strengths we have, and especially, of course, I want to underline the very strong research and science we have in Europe. So it's good basis for innovations. We have also a lot of potential in our startups. We have currently 45,000 startups, and 8,000 of them, they are focusing to AI. So there's huge potential. And also we have 30% more AI experts than USA has having per capita. So we have huge potential, and of course very strong industrial basis. So we shouldn't be too depressed. So I think we have everything what is needed to be competitive.
Just one follow-up on the Capital Markets Union. I know it's not your file, but we've heard it so many times. European Commission President really put competitiveness now at the center of her agenda. You hear European leaders talking about it. Why is it not happening? Why is it not going faster? Is that an issue of political will? Is that an issue of technical difficulties?
It's, I think, very much the same topic that we have often with the single market. I think general level, everybody very much supporting the single market, but then when we are coming with the concrete proposals, different member states, they have already their own system in the place, and they are not willing to change very much or anything on that, and everybody is protecting their own systems. And of course, it means that everybody should be a little bit flexible if we want to have one common system instead of 27 different, and especially when it comes to capital markets union, for example, taxation is playing a very important role in member states, that what kind of taxation regime they are having, and this is something that everybody have to agree in the European level when we are touching to taxation. So it's something what is very much also, of course, making the progress slower always, but we have seen that during this spring, our leaders, they have now many times underlined the importance of single market, and just a few weeks ago also they adopted this roadmap on one market, and everybody is very committed that we will work towards that. So I think it looks very promising now.
You mentioned the strengths also on AI that Europe has, and it was also mentioned in the presentation. Europe massively consumes AI, but we are training the models of others. How much is that an issue for you? You've been very vocal on the EU needing to have more AI application. How do we make sure that we don't just feed the models that other entities have?
Yes, in the same time now, when we want to really encourage different sectors, industrial sectors and public sector apply AI, and we are also supporting them. We have 1 billion funding allocated to different sectors, to key economical sectors in the European Union to support them to use and uptake AI. In the same time, we are also investing to our own AI capacities. Of course, one clear obstacle for us has been that, like I said, that we have very strong research basis, and also we have 8,000 startups which are developing and training AI. One clear obstacle for them has been that they haven't had access to computing capacity, what is needed to train AI. And we have been now investing with our member states to 19 AI factories to build up the computing capacity, and then we can open up this for our startups and for researchers to train their models and systems. So this is very important investments from the European Union and member states side. And of course, the idea around the AI factories, it's not only to provide the computing capacity, what is needed now, but also to gather also talented people and expertise, and also provide more education in the field of AI, and also gather high-quality data sets for the innovation. So the idea around AI factories is bring together computing capacity, talented people, and also high-quality data sets to be able also to train our own AI models, because this is important part of our tech sovereignty, of course, that we are not dependent totally in some big companies from the third countries.
And you have a tech sovereignty package coming up that will include a Cloud and AI Development Act. How will this boost Europe's AI sector? What can you tell us about it?
Yes, the two major legislative initiatives in our tech sovereignty package, they will be our CHIPS Act 2.0. So especially we know that when we speak about critical technologies, chips design is very much driving the innovations in this field. And that's why it's important also that we are able to design and also manufacture more advanced chips in the future in the European Union, and also that we can build very resilient supply chains when it comes to semiconductors and chips. So this is a very important part of our tech sovereignty. But then another important legislative action will be about Cloud and AI Development Act. And there we will also very clearly define the whole technological stack, what is needed to develop AI. And for example, with the cloud services, we will also define what does it mean to have sovereign cloud service, because we know that this kind of infrastructure is very, very critical, of course, for our innovations, that we are able to process our data, and we are also able to use it for new innovations. So these are very key legislations for our technological sovereignty.
And a lot of that debate has been focusing on, you mentioned sovereign cloud, but also by European provisions that we've seen in other initiatives from the Commission as well. How far do you want to go in the by European provisions in this one?
We know that when it comes to these critical technologies, of course, the value chains and the supply chains, they are very global. And we have to boost our own European capacities in these critical fields. But when we speak about tech sovereignty, and we are in our package, we are also planning to now define more clearly that what we mean with tech sovereignty, because different stakeholders, they can have very different definitions. What does it mean? But from our perspective, we don't mean that in the future we are planning to do everything alone or in an isolated manner in Europe. But we want to be sure that we have a certain capacity ourselves, but also that we have trusted partners to work with, that we are not forced to one solution because we have so much dependencies that we don't have any other alternatives. So it's important always that we ourselves, that we can choose with who and how we are operating, that we are not forced to one solution. And I see that to boost European competitiveness and European homegrown technologies, of course, public procurement is playing a very important role, because public administrations, governments, municipalities, regions, European Commission, our institutions, we are very big customers for ICT services. So it really matters how we are doing the public procurement, what kind of criteria we are setting there. And we can also boost our own European homegrown technologies with public procurement. Good example is European Commission's very recently we published our results of our cloud tender. And there we had a cloud tender 180 million euros for sovereign cloud services, and we were selecting 4 European companies to provide sovereign cloud services for next 6 years for the European Commission institutions. And there, of course, it was playing a very important role that how we were setting the criteria of the sovereignty, that what does it mean. And I think for the European companies, for startups, also for bigger companies, of course, it's very important always to have customers. So it's good to buy services from them. Much better than just give funding for the companies. So that when we can buy service or product from them, it's also giving a great incentive for them to finalize the service and to have customer already. So I'm very willing, of course, to use public procurement much more actively to boost European homegrown technologies. And one part of our tech sovereignty package will be also our open source strategy, because we see that more strategically, by using open source more strategically, we can really also boost our homegrown technologies in Europe.
One element that we often hear is even if we want to look for European alternatives, sometimes they're not always there, or they're not as good, or they're not as cheap as some of other competitors. How do you navigate with that argument, which I'm sure comes up a lot in your conversation with companies as well?
I see that in most of the fields we have also European alternatives, but they are often smaller companies and they are not so known on the market. So of course it's important also to give more visibility for them in the markets. But in some cases, of course, the customers, they are so big that several of our companies, they have to come together to provide a service. And it was also the case now for the European Commission when we had this cloud tender, that many of the companies, they were building a bigger consortium together to be able to provide the service what was needed. And I think this is also the way how smaller European companies, they can always often compete also on the global scale with the very big tech companies, that they are coming together and they are building bigger consortium, that they are able to offer also same level of service than the bigger companies.
We've already had the US ambassador to the EU warning you and the Commission about not going too far in this tech sovereignty package. How much is it a concern that there will be some transatlantic pushback or blowback against this package, against these measures?
Everything what we will propose, it will be, of course, very fair and transparent rules what we are proposing. And certainly when we speak about sovereign cloud, there is that kind of services, very sensitive sectors in our society where it's important that the cloud is controlled by Europeans and the data is localized in Europe. Of course, this is not the case with all the services what we are using, but when we look very critical and sensitive areas, areas of our economy or our society, it's important that we are also really focusing to that who is controlling the data and the cloud and where the data is stored. So these are important topics. Nowadays, we have to always look the security aspects of different sectors and also economic security.
Thank you. I want to give the floor to the audience in a minute. I just wanted to ask you to quickly come back to the CHIPS Act, which you mentioned shortly in the beginning. You mentioned resilient supply chains. Is there anything more you can say about what you want to achieve with this CHIPS Act in this tax sovereignty package? Because it's something that a lot of people are curious about.
We still have, when we look the mature legacy chips, we have challenges still with the resilience of the supply chains. So we know that these supply chains, they are very global and they are very vulnerable. So we still have to work with the resilience of these supply chains. But also we want to come up also on the value chain, and we want to be also able to really design and manufacture also the more advanced chips in the future, also AI chips, which are needed to drive the innovations. And of course, this means that we have to invest to research and development, and Europe is very good already in research. But then when it comes to manufacturing, of course, it means that we are speaking about investments, tens of billions. And again, I think that it means that we have to come together, different member states and different industries, to be able also to provide that kind of manufacturing capacity. But in the same time, it's also important to create demand for that kind of chips. And of course, now the investments, what we are doing with our data centers, with our AI factories, these are also creating demand for that kind of more advanced chips.
Thank you. I'm going to look around in the room if there are people that have questions now that you have a chance to ask the EVP directly. I would happily take them. I'll give you another. Yeah, go ahead. If you can identify yourself, that would be great.
Hi, Clark Parsons from the European Startup Network. I have a question about sovereignty, maybe tying to what Seb just presented on the financial side. Yesterday, Friedrich Merz got booed by the DGB when he was announcing that Germans should be having some more investment in their own pension fund tied to the capital markets. Seb just presented the fact that we're positioned for the AI race, but we don't have the capital. It's just not being mobilized here. I'm curious to know, from your point of view, because you're talking about sovereignty all the time, and there's, of course, the Savings and Investment Union is often not linked to you, but I think it's very important that everyone realizes that actually the sovereignty begins on the financial side. And is there anything that you see or would recommend that, that the startup community could do to try and push the agenda on Savings and Investment Union and close this circle where the financing can drive our own sovereignty?
Yes, this is, I think the interlinkage, of course, is very, very strong when we speak about really the financing opportunities and the competitiveness of our technologies, and especially the possibility to grow in the European markets, because when I was underlining that we have so much potential, that we have very strong, high-quality research and science, and so much potential in startups, but of course we can't continue like that, when the companies, when they want to scale up their businesses, they have to move often to USA. We know that in many cases, our startups, they are moving to USA to be able to scale up their businesses because of access to bigger markets and access to capital. And we have, I think we are already quite good when it comes to these first stage investments, but when really the company needs more than 100 million of investment, then often it means that it's difficult to find from the European markets. And at the same time, we know that we have a lot of capital here. So I just can now encourage, of course, and support my colleague, Commissioner Albuquerque, in all her efforts, really to be able to push these initiatives forward, and also that co-legislators could agree on this. But in the same time, I see also that, for example, our 28 regime and EU Inc. will already help our startups really to scale up their businesses in Europe. And startups themselves, they also see that they are able to attract more investments when it's clear that they can operate in all our countries under one company law.
Do you feel, sorry, just on EU Inc., do you feel also the interest with existing companies that often, they're active in one market, they know the legislation there, then to go abroad. Very often they say it would be easier if we start and we know EU Inc. exists, but once you're already in, it's quite hard to then make the step. Is that something that you're taking into consideration when rolling that out?
Yes, EU Inc. is open for all the companies, so everybody, all the companies who would like to change their company model under EU Inc., under EU company law, it's possible, because we didn't put any threshold there that it's only for smaller companies or so on, because then it would have create obstacle, of course, for when the company is growing, if you are dropping out of this EU company law regime. So EU Inc. is open for all the interested companies. But then we have some parts there which are only focused to startups. And I think the most important thing for startups is that often the startup companies, they are not able to pay so big salaries for their employers, but they are giving stock options for their employers. And there we have a rule that if the company is operating under EU Inc., under EU law, then the member states, they can only tax these stock options when the employers are selling them, because in the many member states now the case is that the taxation is coming into the picture already before you are selling your stock options. So we have included now to our EU Inc. proposal that if the company is operating under EU Inc., under EU company law, then the member states couldn't tax the stock options before they are sold. So, and we are planning that later this year we will also come with the new initiatives about the labor and taxation part. So now EU Inc. is only focusing mainly to company law, but there will be also new elements coming later this year, focusing to labor and taxation part.
Thank you. We have time for one or two more questions, if go ahead. There's one here in the middle. Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. Hi, I'm Victoria de Besson. I'm the Secretary General of the European Tech Alliance, which represents European born and bred tech companies. My question is actually quite simple. How do we translate your ambition into action? We are seeing that with the AI omnibus, a lot of the simplification opportunities were missed due to the pace of the discussion. On the digital omnibus, we see that a lot of the good proposals that you have put on the table are being taken out by the Council and by MEPs soon. So we really see that actually the ambition is there, but when we enter into the process, it gets killed by the paperwork and not willing to change. And we very much fear as European tech not having the data that we would need to be able to scale and grow, especially on AI. So how can we translate your ambition to make sure that in the end of the process, it hits the ground and we are able to scale and grow? Because for the moment, what we're seeing is that ambition will just be words, unfortunately.
It's also an important part of our competitiveness compass that when we are very committed now to simplifying the processes and cutting red tape and removing the overlapping parts, of course it's important also that our member states and everybody is working to the same direction. So it's not enough if the Commission is making the proposals. But with the AI Act, I'm satisfied with the process we had with the co-legislators. So we were able to conclude the trialogues in last week, and I think our co-legislators, they were very committed to work with a speedy process on this simplification of AI Act, and we already concluded the trialogues, but now we have the other simplification package on the table still, and it's about data rules and about GDPR and also cybersecurity reporting obligations. And here, of course, I'm also hoping now that the co-legislators, they will decide of their negotiating mandate soon, but they haven't done it yet, so Council is still discussing, and also the European Parliament, that we are also able to finalize the trialogues during the autumn on this package, because I also see that the data part is very important, of course, for our innovations. We have a quite complicated data rule book because we have 4 different legislations on data. So with our simplification package, we were combining everything under Data Act, and we were removing the overlapping part, and we were making it more clear and simpler. And also with the GDPR part, we were also clarifying some things there. So in the future, it should be clear that in the European Union, everything what is connected to personal data is under GDPR, and all non-personal data is under Data Act, and it should be very, very simple and clear in the future. So I hope that co-legislators are able to decide of their negotiating mandate very soon. But we will, of course, continue the work. So we already had a public consultation on so-called digital fitness check. So we will continue the work on to looking different digital rules that how we can simplify the things. And one clear message from our public consultation was that we have quite complicated governance structure, because often in different member states there is different authorities who are enforcing the rules, and it's quite complicated, especially for the companies who are operating in cross-border in the European Union, because there can be different interpretations about different laws. So this is something that we have to also look now, I think, about the governance and enforcement of different rules, that there shouldn't be big differences between the member states.
So more simplification, one of the recommendations of the report. One more question from a fellow reporter, so I cannot say no to that, and then we'll wrap up.
Hi, thank you. Maximilian Henning from Euractiv. One issue for training AI in Europe has been the whole situation around copyright and using copyrighted material for AI. The Commission has just launched a consultation on a new legislative initiative on using copyrighted material for AI. I wanted to ask if you could tell us a few more details about that. Thank you.
Yes, we are supposed to review our copyright rules by the end of this year, and we are just now opening the consultation on that we are gathering the information that what is working and what is not working. We are not planning somehow to opening the whole copyright rule book, but especially we are now looking at the developments on AI sector, that how we should address this. Especially, I'm willing to facilitate more possibilities for the licensing models between the right holders and AI model creators, because of course it's important that our right holders, that they have to be able to defend their rights. But in the same time, many of the right holders, they are also willing to share their content, but of course they want to have fair compensation on that. So that is certainly a field where we have to now work together, because for us, when we want to build up our own AI capacities, it's also important that we can train our models with the European content, with European languages, and we have to incentivize that also and make it also interesting for the both parts. So this is certainly a field where we have to continue to work together.
Thank you so much, Henna Virkkunen. I will invite you to a round of applause for your presence here today.